How do you know that you're winning? You're able to look in a mirror and authentically, you're able to say, I love you. Welcome to another episode of Trigger Proof. My name is Dr. Nima Rahmany. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. If you've noticed, we've been upgrading a little bit here and there. I watch all of the previous shows and I try to see what it is that I can do to up-level it. We got some studio lighting, so this is incremental progress with the production. If you look back on our first episode to today, episode 16, it's been 16 weeks of growth, 16 weeks of learning, 16 weeks of teaching, and I have to tell you, I have an absolute blast. I get a little bit nervous before every episode, so it helps me kind of expand myself a little bit. And this show is dedicated to teaching people what I most needed to learn. Trigger proof doesn't actually mean trigger less. It means becoming responsible for when you get activated, you get confronted, you get triggered, and taking responsibility for transforming that into growth, into love and gratitude, from a state of apathy, anger, helplessness, hopelessness, into pride, courage, and getting you into love and gratitude, which is where healing actually happens. This show is about healing. I've been a chiropractor for the last 18 years, frustrated at why some patients heal and some patients don't. And through my recoveries, my discoveries in my recovery, I've been able to come up with some amazing tools of transformation. So people go from feeling stuck in their lives, stuck in their health, stuck in their relationships, not knowing whether they should stay or they should go, or still stuck from a past breakdown in work or in relationships, not knowing which way to turn, not knowing which way their next move should be, feeling disconnected from themselves and disconnected from their purpose. And this is ideal for those of you who've ever done John DeMartini's work, Byron Katie's work, have done self-development. This show is for you. It's going to speak to you and it's going to help you to transform those stuck states into feeling connected with yourself, connected with a cause greater than yourself, so you can have a context for the relationships in your life. And then here's the ultimate. How do you know that you're winning? You're able to look in a mirror and quite authentically, without bullshitting, you're able to say, I love you. So I really do encourage you to join in. There's a few people on right now. Welcome. Please engage, ask questions. We are here every week from noon Pacific or 3 p.m. Eastern, late at night in Europe on Wednesdays, and early morning on Thursdays in Australia and New Zealand. Welcome. In my journey of chiropractic, I would see patients, this one patient that came in struggling with chronic pain. She was dealing with fibromyalgia. Let's call her Betty. Now, Betty had been dealing with chronic pain and fibromyalgia, emotional disturbances, a past story of trauma, and she had been attending the fibromyalgia support group, which was at a clinic just underneath my chiropractic clinic in Maple Ridge, British Columbia. And every week that she would go, she had been going for years. And one day, one of her friends had her invited to one of my healthcare classes. I do these talks every week in my clinic. And when I spoke, I opened her, what she told me later, that her field of possibility actually expanded, because she was attending these support groups and attending the medical system, one specialist, rheumatologist, one doctor after another, and she was really reaching this ceiling of healing, ceiling of expansion, and she wasn't able to expand anymore. So her friend recommended that she come and see me. She came to one of my healthcare classes that I would do every Tuesday night in my office, and all of a sudden, boom, a new possibility emerged. And we got to working, and within a period of about 3 months, she was off all of her medications, all of the diagnoses that she had. She had a list of diagnoses. She brought it in on her second visit, a list of medications and diagnoses like this. And after 3 months, her diagnoses and medications went down to here, and she continued her own work. When we're going to talk a little bit about what does the work actually mean, she continued her own work, and then within a few months, she was off all of them altogether, a complete new lease on life. And what we discovered was that she was actually, like many other people, addicted to support and praise. Addicted to support, praise, and nurture. If you are dealing with a challenge of your health, not just your health, but consider the possibility that we're constantly healing from something. If you're healing from a relationship breakdown that happened months or years ago, if you're healing from a health crisis or a diagnosis that happened months or years ago, or you're healing from a work-related crisis, whether you got fired, whether you feel like you're not in the right place, and you're actually healing from that crisis, consider the possibility that your addiction to support and praise is what's keeping you stuck. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more in today's episode. Is really about busting free from our addiction to support and praise, because it actually constrains us and our possibility of actually healing. Now, I know this story all too well. When I got divorced back in 2012, I remember feeling this immense sense of helplessness and hopelessness, this feeling of failure, this feeling of, I don't know if I can keep going, this feeling of, I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I was extremely apathetic and hopeless and helpless. And it felt really good to go around and seek the support of my friends and my family, and they were all kind of backing me up in my story of, oh, you know what, Nima, she was so wrong, you're right, you're the right one, she was wrong, she's a bitch, you're so amazing. And it actually felt amazing to have that support. But what I noticed after a few weeks or months of that was that I would just feel like I was just stuck in this purgatory of healing, that I wasn't able to transform. And it wasn't until I started looking at myself and doing the work, which we're going to talk about what the work actually is, that I could transform that feeling of resentment, that apathy, that hopelessness into pride, into courage, and then transform the relationship with myself and her into unconditional love and gratitude, to the point where we're now co-parents to my dog. Whenever I travel, she looks after Lucy, and we look after each other. She can count on me, I know I can count on her, and it's a family, a connection that's there. The resentment is gone, and it didn't happen until I overcame my addiction to support and praise. And what I want to start off by saying is that in order for you to heal, in order for you to grow, in order for you to expand, maximal growth and expansion occurs at the border of support and challenge. We require challenge in order to grow. If you raise a child with support, they stay juvenile and dependent. Now, if you continually challenge and there is no support, you basically stay stuck and there's no forward movement. Your maximal growth and your healing of whatever you're going through, whether it be a relationship limbo or a health crisis or a financial crisis, you require both support and challenge. Even a financial crisis, if you just had your daddy just write you a check and pay for you and to bail you out, you're not actually growing. You're going to stay stuck and juvenile and dependent. So this show today is really about growth and expansion and healing. And the number one constraint that's holding you back from this, because we all want to grow and we all want to heal, and there's always something that we're healing from, the biggest constraint is our addiction to support and praise. Now let me go into this a little bit more. So now, this is not about victim blaming. I really want you to get this. When shitty things happen, when you go through a crisis, a divorce, a relationship breakdown, you've been cheated out of some sort of a business transaction, you are in that moment a victim. There's a perpetrator and there's a victim. And what has a tendency to happen is, if you don't do the proper work and you're seeking the support, you will prolong that story, that victim story, and it becomes your identity. And what you don't understand, this is very unconscious to most people, is that on that journey of transformation, on that journey of healing from that crisis, if you are unconsciously, most of the time unconsciously, holding on to a persistent complaint. There is a payoff that you're getting of a persistent complaint. So what I'd like for you to do right now is to make this relevant for yourself. Ask yourself this question: what is it that I have been holding on to as a persistent complaint? A persistent complaint that we've been trying to get support from. In your case, that could be a relationship breakdown. It could be something you're posting about on social media all the time. What is it that you notice that you're constantly persisting, you're complaining about? An accident that happened, an injury. I see a lot of people, this one of my Facebook friends, he got a surgery and he had a big gasp, like a gash, and a stitches that was huge. So he took a photo and he posted. And what I notice in my chiropractic practice is people really love engaging in their stories of suffering. So I want you to ask yourself, what story of suffering have you been repeating over and over and over again, in an effort unconsciously or maybe consciously to gain sympathy and empathy from other people? That there's an alluring payoff to these persistent complaints that you might be having, but you might not even be aware of them. And I'd like to go over a few of them for you so that you can maybe see yourself in that. So for example, let me give you a classic example. There are a lot of support groups out there for women who've just gone through divorce. Okay, so it's they even made a movie about it, like First Wives Club. And what I've noticed, a friend of mine who went through that process, and she told me after months of going through there, it was just a group of angry, bitter women going over their woe is me story. Now, what they didn't realize was that they're getting a payoff of this persistent complaint. So what I'd like for you to do is take a look at the story of suffering that you're going through, whether it be a physical one that you keep talking to about. On my last breakup, I caught myself several times talking about this persistent complaint of her story, her side of the story. And I'm constantly catching myself, as I'm catching myself talking about it, that is my wake-up call to look at what payoff am I getting out of this persistent complaint that I'm looking for, seeking support from other people. The first one is a justification. I get to justify my current lack of growth. I get to justify my current place of where I'm at in this world. If I'm not happy with it, if I'm persistent complaining, seeking support from other people, then I get to justify where I'm at. If I'm not really fulfilled with the level that I'm at, I can use that persistent complaint as a justification. Let me know if that resonates with you. The second thing that I get out of this persistent complaint is I get to avoid my responsibility. See, in every relationship breakdown, in every health crisis, in many health crises, especially the chronic ones. I don't mean to say, childhood leukemia or anything like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the major chronic illnesses that plague our society today: diabetes, heart disease, cancer, some chronic pain syndromes, fibromyalgia. If I persistently complain about it to other people, what happens is I get to avoid responsibility. If I'm constantly seeking support with my friends or a support group, and I'm constantly repeating the story of suffering, it's a convenient way of actually avoiding responsibility and blaming the other person. The next benefit that I get, or payoff that I get from persistently complaining and seeking support, is I get to dominate. And if you ever had a problem with your boss or an ex-lover that you feel quite resentful about, that you've subordinated yourself to, that you felt disempowered by constantly seeking support, posting on social media, complaining, what happens is this is an unconscious strategy for you to dominate or avoid feeling dominated. What you got to be aware of is that's what you're getting out of this persistent complaint. And the last one is you get to be right and make the other person wrong. Now, these are the payoffs that we get of seeking support and persistently complaining, but unfortunately, there is a cost. And I'm going to have Dr. Russell Kennedy come on in just a moment and share a little bit about his experience with that whole thing, especially in the healthcare industry. But the cost of your constant complaining, the woe is me story, and seeking that support is that it robs you of your power, it robs you of your freedom, it robs you of your self-expression, and your sense and feeling of being alive is lessened, and it destroys your health. Constantly complaining about it, going from one doctor to another, from one person to another. I would notice this in a lot of people, patients of mine coming in, and they would just go off about their story, and I would see that there was kind of like this little high that they would get off it. I'm going to get Dr. Russell Kennedy to come on in just a moment right now. Dr. Russ, welcome. Ooh, I like your jacket.
Well, it's a shirt actually, but I dressed up for this, Nima. Thanks for having me on the show.
Did you do your hair?
Welcome to my underground lair.
Dr. Russ, could you tell me, was it the same for you that patients sometimes would come in and they would spout off their list of symptoms, and it was as though they were just so enthralled and enrolled in that story, and you could tell that there wasn't really a keen desire to overcome, but it was just kind of to get support? Could you see that in your practice a lot?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people who have chronic illnesses had lack of attachment to their caregivers when they're younger. So they kind of transfer that sort of caregiving nature onto doctors. And you felt this, sure, I'm sure, as a chiropractor as well. So they abdicate their responsibility, and when you abdicate responsibility, you totally disempower yourself. And the reason why the illnesses come up in your body in the first place, a lot of times, is to get you to take responsibility for yourself and to say, hey, I'm going to help myself. And if you get into a support group, or you depend on a healer to fix you, you're actually creating more of the problem that you came in to see the healer about in the first place.
Totally. And do you notice as well this whole concept of when they come in, and by the label, and especially with the labels, the key component of this is a label. Whether you label it fibromyalgia, you label the person narcissistic personality disorder, you label victim of so-and-so. That label, what does that label do for the individual who's trying on their path to healing?
Well, on some people, it seems to help them because they have a reason now. It's like, okay, this is my diagnosis. This is the reason. This is the symptom complex that I'm dealing with. Now, if they use that to empower themselves and go, okay, how can I find out more about borderline personality disorder? How can I find out more about prostate cancer? Great. But if they use it as a label to disempower themselves, again, this whole disempowerment, the reason that the illness came up in your body in the first place is really telling you to look after yourself. And then if you not only don't look after yourself, but you abdicate your power to someone else, the illness is going to get worse. Totally. So that's why I love when you said the ceiling of healing, because when we get into these support groups, there is this sort of, oh, poor you, me too, poor you, me too. Unless the group is actually empowering you, like at the end of the group, it's like, okay, by next week, you're going to do this. You're going to report back to us what you've done. Great. But if it's just one of these things where you're just getting pats on the back and hugs, like I said, a lot of people wind up getting attention when they're children only when they're sick.
Bingo.
So, if the parents are overwhelmed,
the parents are not attuned at all, and the only time that you get any love and attention is when you get sick, then what do you think's going to happen?
You're going to keep searching for your pseudo parent to try and heal you, which is just going to make you more and more sick. So the trigger in this case is to be aware of the fact that you need to look after yourself. Now, I'm not saying we don't need others. I think we need a certain amount of support from others and ourselves. But what happens is if you get 90% of your support from others, there's only 10% there to give yourself healing. And when you get support, all this support from other people, some patients tend to just sort of stop giving it to themselves because they're getting it from the outside. So it's a combination, and it's kind of like training wheels, like we as healers and doctors, we're kind of putting you on training wheels. You've fallen off your bike. You're not able to get back up on your bike. So we'll put you on your bike. We'll put you some training wheels. We'll get you going again. And then at some point, hopefully we can take the training wheels off. Totally. Because if we never take the training wheels off, you're always depending on us. And when you're in that dependent, disempowered position, your illness is just going to get worse.
Totally. Thank you, Dr. Russ. I might call on you later. Would you stick around?
Yeah, I'll be around for another 15 minutes.
Okay, brother. So check this out. Dr. Russ brought up an amazing perspective here, is that our support group's wrong. Now, here's what I want you to understand. I'm not saying that support groups are wrong. Here's the thing. I want you to look at this scale of emotions and levels of energy. It all depends on your level of energy. And remember, what is the number one outcome? Let's think of what is the outcome? What's the intention? If the intention and the outcome is healing, then let's go into what happens. Something happens, you get a diagnosis, or you're in some sort of a relationship breakdown, there's an explosion that happens, you have an injury, you get, all of a sudden you get diagnosed with something, some sort of a crisis you're met with. The initial reaction is shock. There's a trauma that happens. And oftentimes you start in a level of helplessness and hopelessness. You become apathetic. You start going, what's the point? I don't know if you can relate to that. You think, what's the point? What point is it? There's no point in moving on. Life is pointless. Life is empty. Life is meaningless. There's no point in moving on. Now, that's your lowest level of energy, which is apathy. In those moments, having a group of support is critical. It's like in AA, it's like you hit rock bottom in AA. You need a support group around you to bring you from that space of apathy and on death's door, from hopelessness and helplessness to apathy. Now, what happens is with this group, and let's say the First Wives Club, you start going into story, and you hear stories and stories and stories, and woe is me and poor me, and you start going to other people, and you're getting that is a much higher level of energy than complete apathy. But here's the problem. If you stay there and you do not bust through that ceiling, you will constrain your own healing. So what happens is, what you require in order to heal, to continue to heal, is an up level of this energy. So that's why support groups is, going from apathy, using support groups to go from fear to anger. When you're angry, that's a higher level of energy. So turning and going from apathy to angry at God for the diagnosis, angry at the system, angry at your ex, that is a step up in level of energy from apathy. From hopelessness and helplessness up to fear towards anger, you've now up leveled. But here's the question. The question is, how far do you want to go? How far do you want to go towards healing? What is the outcome that you're trying to get? There are many people out there that maybe if you look in a mirror and you look at yourself, are stuck in fear and anger about it for years. And the drawback of that, the thing of that, is that that's actually costing you your health and healing. So this is where normally people who come and reach out to us, if they're in this state, we usually send them to support workers or counselors or psychologists or support groups like that. Because what happens is the people who we help, who completely transform, have already transcended that, and they're in a state of anger and fear. And my job is to open them up to possibility. That's what I'm doing for you right now, is opening you up to a possibility. The possibility that if you were to feel a sense of worthiness and deserving, this is the key, you must feel worthy and deserving of healing. Let me repeat that. Let me say that again. You are not going to heal if you're stuck in if you're stuck in hopelessness, apathy, and fear. You're not going to heal. Because deep down inside, when you're in that space, you don't feel worthy and deserving of healing. So my job when I meet with people and when I do my talks is to instill and implant an idea of pride and deserving. So I'm going to say it again to you. You are absolutely worthy and deserving of healing. The problem is, the main obstacle is, you might not deserve that you are, because you have a whole bunch of guilt, you have a whole bunch of shame about the entire thing. You got to get over that. You got to get over that, because you are part of the universe. There's nothing separate. There's no separation between you and I. You are just as deserving as anyone else of healing. You must believe that you're deserving of healing first. Once we get there, we must transcend that and jump into courage. Courage to do the work. When Dr. Russ says to do your own healing, he's talking about doing the work, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, of what it's going to take to actually do the healing, what it takes to transcend the relationship challenge, the relationship breakdown that you haven't got through, the divorce, the separation, the health crisis that's come. It requires you to access courage. Courage to go back to those old stories. Courage to face your shadow, the parts of you that you don't love, the parts of you that you feel ashamed about. It takes courage. I have not worked with one person that had not had to deal with their fears, to face their dragons and demons, because that's your hero's journey of healing. You require that. So you must have courage in order to jump to the next level, which is acceptance. Acceptance of what is, acceptance of where you're at, acceptance of the story of your relationship breakdown, full, complete acceptance of what is. That's the first step, but guess what? You can actually go a little bit further. And this next step is the key to your healing. You're not, in fact, I'm so confident about this. 18 years as a healthcare practitioner, I know congruently, 100%, that there is no better healer out there than the healing power of unconditional love and gratitude. So check this out. You must start from helplessness and hopelessness, apathy, fear, anger with the support groups, seeking support from everybody else, but then believing that you're deserving of actually healing, and getting the courage to take responsibility and stop blaming other people and taking it on yourself, and then getting to a space of acceptance for yourself, for that other person, for the illness, for the injury, for the trauma, full acceptance. And then, this is where few people go to, but this is what we do with the overview experience workshops, is we get people to a space of unconditional love and gratitude for what is. And in that space, that is the requirement for healing. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying this is exactly what we need to do. So Dr. Russ, I'd love to hear from you based on this kind of gradient scale and your experience with healing and relationships and in your own life. Can you see the wisdom of that, and can you jump in and share some of the mechanisms of how we can actually get there?
Yeah, well, I think the first mechanism is awareness. Is just seeing, how much do I need other people? How much do I need? How much am I using my own self? How much am I caring for my own self? And how much am I depending on other people? What was my pattern as a child? Was I looked after? Did I feel cared for as a child? If you don't feel cared for as a child, it's very hard to build that muscle in yourself. But it's becoming aware is what you have to do, and see, okay, how can I start connecting with myself? How can I start taking, and even small steps, even looking a bit better after your diet, texting somebody every day that you really are appreciative of, just little things that just change your brain chemistry a little bit for the positive, because anything that's even slightly positive is at least not negative.
Yeah.
Because we tend to get into this negative cycle. The brain has a fear bias. So we tend to go to the negative. And if we're in pain, we really go to the negative. So it's all about really connecting to yourself. And that's a skill. That's a skill that you teach. That's a skill that I teach. And it doesn't come to a lot of us naturally, especially if we didn't have it as children. So it really comes down to that unconditional love for yourself, which I know sounds kind of woo-woo, and it is on some level. But it's just developing that skill, because compassion for yourself is a skill. It's not something that you just decide, hey, I'm going to be compassionate to myself. You build this skill over the course of time. You build these neural networks, these neural wirings for taking care of yourself. And when you take care of yourself, your body will start taking care of you, because your body is the unconscious mind. So if your body is acting up, you need to really focus on how can I connect with myself, connect with my body, and become one with that, as opposed to trying to get it from the outside.
Dr. Russ, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I know you got to go.
Thanks,
I appreciate you being here and putting in your 2 cents. I appreciate that, brother.
No problem. We'll talk soon. Good luck.
So one of the things that he said was key, and we're going to go into how you resolve this. We're going to go into the work of how you resolve this, and I want to introduce you to somebody who actually took this on and completely transformed everything for herself. Now, the key is awareness. The question that you're going to want to ask yourself is, in this spectrum, in this entire spectrum towards myself, when you're out seeking support, where are you? Are you in helplessness and hopelessness? Are you in apathy? Are you in fear? Are you trying to justify where you're at? You want to check in and be aware. This is part of the work that I'm going to share with you in just a moment. Check in and be aware. Next time you call to complain, this persistent complaint you have about your ex-lover, about your health crisis, about your money situation. What are you doing right now? What are you trying to prove? This is the question that you want to ask. The quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions that you ask. And the question that you're going to want to ask is, as you're seeking that support, as you're reaching out, you're in this support group, or you're seeking out your friends and you're trying to make the other person wrong and trying to be right and trying to dominate, and you're trying to avoid responsibility and blame the other, and you want to dominate. So you want to ask this question: what am I trying to prove? This is awareness that Dr. Russ just said. Self-love starts with an awareness of self. Most of this is unconscious. So when you ask yourself, what am I trying to prove? Am I trying to prove that men suck? Am I trying to prove that I was hard done by, that life isn't fair, that God is not fair, that life is crap? And you want to look at that, and here's the key, is if you want to heal, you want to pay attention to the company that you keep. You want to pay attention to the people that are around you and their energetic field and their conversations. Because if their level of conversation is apathy, men suck, what's the point? Then guess what you're going to see more of? Your work towards healing is about spending time with people who've already transcended the challenge that you're going through. You want to be in that level of conversation of possibility rather than constraint. That's the only key to healing and transformation. It's not going to happen if you have an addiction to support and praise. You must overcome that. In fact, if you don't choose challenges that inspire you, you attract challenges that despire you. If we just seek support and try to avoid challenge, we attract challenge that's not inspiring. So I'm calling on you to become the badass warrior that you are of healing, of love, and to take full responsibility and up your energetic level towards love and gratitude, because that's the only way you're going to heal. Otherwise, if you don't get that part right, you will be forever continuing to tell your story of suffering and getting support from other people who have not yet transcended it. And you only have this one life. So you might as well choose to surround with people who are moving towards the same outcomes that you are. What are we talking about when we are dealing with the work? How do you heal from this problem? Well, if you followed the show, you've heard me talk about this again and again and again. It's worth me telling you, is this is the story, this is the journey that I went through in my recovery, the discoveries that I made. Without doing this part right, I call it your intimacy upgrade. Without doing this, healing is not possible. So what is it that we do? The first thing that we do in order to heal, to transform, whether it's a relationship issue, breakdown, whether you feel hard done by, there was a toxic relationship situation, or you're in a state of depression, anxiety, or a health crisis, the first step is to regulate your nervous system. I believe episode 2 on our YouTube show, we talk about all of the steps that we take our clients through, but this is an ongoing thing that you must consistently be committed to in order for you to transform. Otherwise, you're justifying not healing. You always have an excuse for not doing the work and having the courage to do it. Nervous system regulation goes anywhere from being mindful of your breath to mindful and aware of your surroundings around you, to getting chiropractic care, to exercising, to aligning your day with habits and rituals and routines that allow your nervous system to have some sort of normalcy and structure, to meditate and attune your body to your sensation and getting into sensation consistently again and again and again into the body, rather than getting out of the mind where we dissociate, we get back into the body. The last part is aligning your day with higher value events. Like, for example, myself, teaching is one of my highest values. So part of my regulation of nervous system is doing this show every single week and doing my Facebook Lives and Instagram. If you don't follow me at Dr. Nima. I do Instagram posts, any thoughts that come up. Teaching is one of my highest values. So I make sure I structure that in my day, because that's a part of nervous system regulation. And the next part of the work is clearing these past stories. We hold on to these victim stories whenever something happened. Are part of our spiritual development. We feel when something happened to us, we play the victim. And in order for you to heal, you must clear that past story. You must see yourself in it. You must take full ownership of your part of it. This is not about victim blaming either. This is about taking full responsibility and ownership so that you don't give away your power. This is all about restoring and taking back power when you've given it away. And when you have done that right and cleared the past stories and you've regulated your nervous system, you all of a sudden develop a sense of presence. People can feel that you're here now, that you're not somewhere else, that you're not distracted. This was one of my biggest challenges. And when I learned how to regulate my nervous system and I learned how to clear my past stories, all of a sudden I felt a sense of presence that I never felt before. I was able to be in my body, not in my past or worrying about my future. The next part is you gotta learn how to dance with that dark passenger. The ego, the shadow, that's blocking this little wounded inner child that's inside of you that felt not seen and not heard, that's going to come up again and again and again. And instead of allowing it to drive the bus, simply by becoming a witness to it and learning how to manage that voice that says, I'm not enough, and that wounded inner child, and learning how to reparent that wounded inner child and be connected to that dark passenger rather than completely unconscious of it. When you get that part right and you've cleared the past stories, you now have a sense of understanding for yourself. Instead of shaming and blaming yourself, you see your own innocence. And that's key to healing yourself, is seeing your innocence. And when you clear your past story and you dance with your dark passenger, you have a sense of understanding for that other person as well. That person that you feel that you've been hard done by, that you've been wronged by. You can actually see that you have an understanding for them as well. It's very powerful to be able to do that, to be able to lift that veil. I had such a resentment towards my ex-wife, this amazing sense of freedom that happened when I was able to lift that story and then clear the guilt and shame that was going on and see my own innocence and hers. It was very, transformative. And this is why I love teaching it. And the last part is when you learn to dance with your dark passenger and you're nervous and you've regulated your nervous system, you get and develop this sense of authenticity. Without doing those parts properly, you're not present, you're angry constantly, you're feeling this bitterness, and you're suppressing your healing. You put a ceiling on your healing. And remember, the name of this game is not about who's right, trying to be right or anything. It's really about healing and transformation, and it can't happen unless you transform that resentment towards yourself and other people into unconditional love and gratitude, while at the same time learning how to regulate your nervous system. And the key component to this, when you're in relationships with other people, because really, let's face it, it's all about relationships with other people, it's about learning how to empathically communicate. And this was a big problem for me because I didn't really know, because I was so disconnected from myself, I didn't know how to have empathy for other people. The narcissistic trait was far surpassed my altruism, and this was a complete out of balance experience until I learned how to have empathy for myself first and be able to get attuned to my body and understand what pain felt like rather than running from it, hiding, suppressing, repressing, distracting. I actually felt it through the nervous system regulation. And then I learned how to empathically communicate with others. And now I can honestly say that empathy is one of my superpowers. And it's something that you can learn. You definitely can learn. And it's critical if you want to have meaningful relationships and a healthy work life as well, because it's an ability to be able to be seen and heard and see and hear another, which is what intimacy is all about. And the last part, I don't know if you can see it here, commitment and community. We cannot heal unless we have community to share our shame, our guilt, but it's not to stay stuck in apathy. The question you want to ask yourself is my support group hearing me and seeing me, which is very important, but are they then challenging me to a greater version of myself? Or is it like crabs in a bucket keeping you stuck? We definitely require community because we heal in community. We can use the art of co-regulation to help self-regulate. Ironically, we had an episode on that. Definitely you want to look back on the episodes of healing through community, and it can't happen unless you have a commitment. And for that, I'd like to introduce a very special individual, Rose. Hello. Rose reached out to me and just a few months ago and was going, I guess, this is a perfect example of overcoming the support network of the medical system and then doing the work and then seeing how everything transformed within her body. Rose, welcome. I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
So Rose, could you just share a little bit about how you met me, how we met, and
Sure.
What was it that had you curious and what were you dealing with at the time?
Certainly. So I was in search of things to help me with my chronic pain. It had been going on since 2009. I saw an osteopath on a regular basis, but I was heavily medicated and I wasn't real happy with that. So I had the last kind of thing that I'd looked at was a pain body cleanse that was being put on through a docu-series that I found online. And lo and behold, Dr. Nima was a guest on, I believe, maybe the third of the 4 shows. And as soon as Nima started to speak, it clicked with me. It made sense. It was like, this is what I've been looking for. I just could feel it in my bones that it was. So I did call and I interviewed with Nima, and then I chose to do an overview weekend, and then I chose to sign up and do the work in group as well. And it's just been so healing, and to be honest, the pain started dissipating without my realizing it. If you're ever in a lot of pain, you always know you're in pain, but when it starts to go away, you kind of don't notice initially, and then one day you think, whoa, my neck isn't hurting all the time. And so I was seeking everything through the medical field because I didn't know any other way. And it was not my answer. My pain was actually, as it turns out, stored in my body in story.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask. Thank you. Can you share for anybody watching who's been dealing with that and they've been seeking that support, maybe going to pain relief support groups or dealing with an emotional pain, what was the big thing? Because I'm a chiropractor, I've been working on patients for a while to help them with chronic pain, but you live in Seattle, which is about a 3-hour drive away, and the only time I ever adjusted you was at the weekend workshop. So we've actually been doing the work on it together. What do you think could be attributed to the pain leaving your body?
I believe it was going into story, and I realized different stories that were trapped in my cellular level of my body. For instance, when I was a small child, I was one of 9, and I didn't get a lot of attention because how much time does a parent have, right? I didn't get my needs met as well as they needed to be. And so I created stories and held on to things without even being aware of that.
And that
so
basically, those stories, those trapped emotions in your body are these stories, and you're literally tensions and compressions that are in your body that are tied into those old cognitive stories.
Exactly. And I'll share something. So when I was in my school pictures, my shoulders were like this all the time. I was never aware of it, but looking back when I grew up, I was like, wow, that's crazy. And when I did my overview weekend in May, it was very interesting because when I completed my overview, Eilina said the moment that it clicked for me, she said, your shoulders dropped. They dropped. And I'm like, wow, I was completely unconscious of that.
Amazing. Yeah, we unconsciously hold on to our stories. Our biography becomes our biology, doesn't it?
Yes, yes.
So what we've done with you, and this is why I left my full-time chiropractic practice, I still practice part-time, is because I love unraveling these stories for people. And here's the key. Can you see as well, Rose, that you went from helplessness, hopelessness, and you had moments of apathy, like what's the point? Is this ever going to help? And you got into states of anger about it. Did you ever be were you angry about this? You're like,
absolutely. Yeah, tired of the pain.
And then what we did was it took a lot of courage to go back and change those old stories, but you went from acceptance to now an unconditional state of love and gratitude for all of that. And that is basically the intimacy upgrade. And this is what I've seen to be true from 18 years of chiropractic practice, dealing with people with chronic pain, with emotional pain, with relationship breakdown, with health breakdown, with disconnection from purpose, is it's all one model that it's not easy, but it's very simple that you just follow, and all of a sudden you go from apathy and stress and complaint, telling your story to doctors and other people, to unconditional love and gratitude and healing, and now more connected to yourself, to others, and better in relationships. So have you noticed anything that you've taken on, not only what's been the difference, not only in your physical pain, but what have you observed as far as the level of relationships you've been able to attract into your life?
Well, it's interesting because I have been single now for 20 years, and I just, since the program, started dating someone that I knew years ago, but we bumped into one another. It is the best relationship I've ever been in. There's just a lot of openness, a lot of give and take. And I don't have all that anger. Yeah, a lot of authenticity. That has been key, absolutely key.
Beautiful. Amazing. Thank you, Rose, for showing what's possible when you commit to the work. It's not easy, but it's a very simple concept that very few people who are stuck in apathy and fear are too scared to make that jump into courage and into acceptance and unconditional love. And so you've been an amazing example. It's been amazing working with you.
Thank you. You as well.
What would you say to somebody who's been dealing with that and been telling their story again and again and again? What would you say to somebody who's on the fence about jumping in?
I would tell anyone actually to give Nima a call and just speak with him about the program, because I really, my life has been on hold since 2009. I mean, I've walked around in pain. You just don't have a full life when you're in chronic pain. And the medical field was not the way for me to go. I had a surgeon want to operate on my neck and fuse 3 vertebrae. And I'm like, oh, why would I have done that? That would have been terrible for me. And so the emotional piece is actually the key piece. And I just encourage anyone to check it out.
Rose, thank you so much. Thanks for being on the show and being so vulnerable.
Thank you.
Sharing with everyone. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It is so rewarding to be able to, take a risk. I got to admit, it was a risk for me to leave my full-time chiropractic practice. My parents thought I was absolutely crazy. But to be able to make an impact on chronic pain, because I knew in my heart of hearts all along that this was the path towards victory for many people who've been stuck. And the key component is having the courage to get over your story, having the courage to stop seeking support and actually find a practitioner that's going to both support and challenge you to get a little bit uncomfortable, challenge you to own your shit, challenge you to raise the bar in your life and start becoming more ambitious in this one life, because at the end of the day, you want to look back and go, did I do everything I could with what I was given? And that can't happen if you're stuck in apathy, in story, in hopelessness and helplessness, repeating your story of suffering to all of the people around you. The world needs you to be the greatest version of yourself, because as you rise, a rising tide lifts all boats, and there are plenty of other people who are stuck in a victim state with the same thing that you're dealing with who could use your help. I hope that this has been relevant for you. Let me know in the comments section. If you haven't joined our Facebook group, The Art of Powerful Alignment, I'd love to have you continue the conversation. Once again, my name is Dr. Nima Rahmany, and this show is dedicated to those who are stuck in health, relationship, and career limbo, in crisis. Break free from that space and be connected to a cause greater than themselves, feeling healthy, more alive and more vibrant, and being in high-level relationships to match the level of growth and authenticity and expansion that you would love as an outcome. By taking on the work that we just talked about, that Rose just talked about, you can actually transform it all. Let me know if you have any questions, and next week we will see you same time, same place, and we'll see you at the next perfect time.